that icon opens the available views, and here you can select which tool to open. So you can view the actual annotations, temporal annotations, whatever they are. You see the windows popping up and disappearing. And for authoring, we have the narrative canvas and a narrative tree. Then for content, we have media content browser, which I'm not going to use now. Media items, you see the bins disappear, and so on and so forth. Narrative preview I want to have, and I'm going to close that. So the separation, I said there was a separation between story structure and media, and the story structure is composed on the narrative canvas. And the narrative canvas has here on the left-hand side the basic structures that are used to compose anything. And they are, this button here is a link structure. This is, if you wish, the threads and the conditions. So if you play a media item, a clip, and then you reach a point where you want to decide whether to play a number of others. You have some possibilities, and then you have a condition that tells you which those to play. So is the concept of a graph familiar? Probably not. Mm-hmm. Yes? It is a graph. So a graph has nodes and paths in between nodes. The nodes are clips, and the paths are their possible sequence. So by following a path in the graph, then you get a sequence of clips. And here you see already it's just a linear sequence. That clip is played first, and that clip, then that object, and that object. In shape-shifting media, we have the concept of a narrative object, and that could be an actual media item, or it could be a structure, however complex it is. And through this, you can create richer and richer structures through this factorization. So, for example, you see that stall is an object that's going to be played after that, and it's going to be followed by the object entry. But if I double click, I go inside that, and I see that it is a layer structure, and there are two clips. That clip and this clip are played in parallel. So the layer structure is another possibility of combining media objects. And the layer allows objects to be played in parallel. So if you put video and audio, they will be played in parallel. That's the idea of a structure. If you have some interactive elements, then you can put those on another layer. So then you have a 3-layer. Don't worry if things are not that clear now. I'm just starting to introduce the.
Just define an interactive element. You mean like a graphic or what?
We treat in shape-shifting media, interaction is an object, like a clip, a video clip or an audio clip. So when we want some prompting to be sent to an interface and some information to be grabbed through that interface that is then used in the story, we do that through an interactive object. So the interactive object presents a number of options, has a lifetime, so it's a start and an end. The duration is time-based as well, and has a prompt that is displayed to the user. That's the interactive object. So then, when we craft a space, when an interactive object is reached, that information is sent to the interface, and the interface is ready to grab it from the end user. And when the interactive object is finished to play, the information that was grabbed through it is available in the narrative space, such that we can write conditions based on that.
It's set to the narrative space?
I think we have a. I'm not sure what the best way to. Okay. Anyway, there is another structure that we have, and that is, we call it a selection group. A selection group is, imagine a repository of clips, of narrative objects, and an expression, a statement that describes how a part or one of them is going to be selected when that point in the story is reached. For example, if I made some selections, some choices, express some choices via an interactive object, then those choices will be affected later in the story. And one easy way to do that, very simple way, is to choose the clips that match my story. I write the expression, and I have, let me actually explain it on this space here. Main body is an element in this sequence of narrative objects. When main body is reached, main body is a selection group. Its content that consists of narrative arcs, that and that and that and that, these are narrative arcs. One of those narrative arcs will be selected and played there, and then the story continues to the next object. So that's a selection mechanism from a repository of objects. And how the selection mechanism happens, that's a quite complex mechanism, is in this expression writing. And I'm going to go to the properties tool. And for example, you see these narrative arcs, there's a space there called editing rule, have an object value, have something that is called object value. So they are annotated with object values, and the object value is an expression that considers some parameters which come from interaction, such as literature, poetry, Sydney. These are, if you remember, the keywords that were displayed on screen. And the user chooses different interests in these keywords, and those are there then used in calculating the object value. For example, here, if I have high interest in literature, I have a value of 3. If I have no interest in poetry, the value 0, and no interest in Sydney, so this will become 9. Other narrative arcs will have different values, and the rule that selects one narrative arc from this structure is maximize the object value. So you could see that by having keywords and me expressing interest in those keywords, then I take an object that is of the highest interest to my expressed interest there and then. I think it's like throwing ourselves in deep water and not learning how to swim yet. I'm going to now leave the tools a little bit on the side. Can I have just another 3 minutes, please, and then I'm done. Thank you. I hope in 3 minutes I'll be able to. The main concept in a golden age, the main concept in a golden age is the narrative arc. The narrative arc tells a story in itself. And a golden age becomes a larger story by sequencing narrative arcs. A narrative arc introduces, so a narrative arc. A narrative arc is about something. That something is expressed with keywords. So a narrative arc could be about architecture, gardens, and Elizabeth. Each narrative arc has a number of keywords attached, and these keywords have different values. So the main topic could be architecture, therefore the value is 3. We chose some, we crafted some values. It talks about gardens a little bit, is 1. It talks about Elizabeth as well a little bit, so the value for that is 1. And each narrative arc, you see here, narrative arc. Each narrative arc has this annotation done manually. So we know what's in the repository and what the subjects are. Now, in turn, each narrative arc introduces themes for my interest. So although when I watch a narrative arc and I see some buildings, maybe at some point, one of the buildings is a church. At that point, I could introduce an interactive object that asks me whether I have any interest in church, whether the story should go on that line. So these are appropriate moments during the narration, like cues, visual or audio cues, when other themes are opened up by the object itself. So although this is about architecture, garden, and Elizabeth, it could say somewhere there when it's played between that and that, if this is time, somewhere there in that region, it could ask me whether I'm interested in church, for example. And it could introduce other keywords, including some of their topics. It depends how we craft that. So what happens is that we watch a narrative arc, we make a choice, and that choice, together with my previous choices, is then affected when the next narrative arc is selected. And that is the main logic. It's not as simple as that, but that's the main logic. And what happens, the problem that happens is that by continuously making choices, the space grows and grows and grows, and then I don't know what to select anymore. So at one point I'm interested in architecture, then in church I express choices, and so on and so forth. So this grows far too much, and doesn't express my interest anymore. It's just a collection of all my previous interactions. So another mechanism that we build in a golden age is decaying of choice. As soon as a new choice is made, all the previous ones are decayed. And choices are values between 0 and 3. So if I choose in one place a high interest in something, when next time I choose something, that interest is decreased to 2. When I make another choice, that's decreased to 1, and then it disappears. Such that I keep the most immediate choices active, and I somehow remove what I had.
This wouldn't have been applicable, though, to the lovers.
No.
Okay, that's a different. That's a different kind of initiation mechanism.
Yes.
Okay.
So what we had here, the basic principle was to create footage. Footage is about something. The footage itself then introduces cues, and this decaying mechanism that allows us to then maximize the relevance of what is chosen automatically to one's interest. That's the basic mechanism. And these numbers 0, 1, 2, and 3 were just plucked out the thin air. What's the phrase?
Thin air.
Thin air. We intended to check different values, and we experimented with different expressions, whether they should be added, should be multiplied. We crafted in the end something that worked well with numbers. But of course, this is subject to further